Welcome to my talk about mental models. So I know in the current global pandemic situation, it seems far away, but imagine you want to go on a vacation in summer and you've decided to go to Lago Maggiore in the north of Italy. You start researching online for an apartment and you find one and it's really nice looking. It has a great price and it states it's a bit out of town. And you research it on Google, you do the distance mapping and you see, okay, it's not that bad. It's only 2 kilometers away from the city center and the lake, and you book it. You're excited. And then you finally go on vacation, you get to the apartment, and all of a sudden you realize, oh crap, the lake is at the bottom and the apartment is up the hill. And the 2 kilometers of direct sight line turn into 5 or 6 kilometers and you cannot really walk to the lake. And this is a mental model called the map is not the territory. So while maps are necessary, they are also flawed. Maps, and by that I mean also concepts, models, abstractions, they have limitations. A map might be wrong without you noticing it. A map loses information in the process of reduction. So in this case, for example, you lose the 3D information of the height. And a map might need interpretation, which is also a process that is error prone. So to apply maps and models correctly, we need to keep their limitations in mind. My name is Tobias. I'm a project and program manager at the Kia account, and I've been with Netcentric for 5.5 years now. So what are mental models? A model is a representation of how something works. And since we cannot keep all of the details of the world in our brains, we use models to simplify the complex into understandable and organizable chunks. So we can define mental models as recurring concepts that can be used to create a mental picture of a situation, which becomes a model that you can later apply in similar situations. And understanding the relevant models for a situation allows us to bypass lower level thinking and immediately jump to higher level thinking. What does that mean? So, for example, in physics, we have the concept of critical mass. And this describes the amount of fissile material that is needed to sustain a nuclear chain reaction. And interestingly, this model can also be applied to business models. So let's say you want to start a business where people can rent out their unused camper vans to other users. And applying the model of critical mass, and you see that at least it partially matches, and that also to have a successful camper van rental business, you need a certain threshold of camper vans on offer to make it a viable business. And once you have recognized that, you can go to the higher level thinking about the details. What is the amount of camper vans in an area that's needed to reach this critical mass? How far apart can 2 camper vans be to still count towards the same critical mass? 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 50 kilometers. And are there maybe even ways how you can jumpstart the business by buying a couple of camper vans yourself and offering them in an area for rent? The term mental model goes back to Charlie Munger. He's a very successful American investor and attorney, and he's a vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, the investment company of Warren Buffett. And he gave a speech at the University of Southern California in 1994 titled Lesson on Elementary Worldly Wisdom. And in this speech, Charlie Munger recommends to build a latticework of mental models from a large selection of disciplines and gives examples from math, economics, psychology, physics, biology, and to use this latticework to provide context to decision-making processes. And according to him, this process should lead to worldly wisdom, and that is how he became successful at business, investing, and life. And I've picked now for this talk a couple of models that I think are useful from the areas of leadership, decision-making, and communication. The first model from the area of leadership is called Commandos, Infantry, and Police. And this model states that there are in general 3 distinct types of people, the commandos, the infantry, and police, but all of them are needed over the life cycle of a company and also a project. This is from the military category, was first mentioned by Robert Cringely in a book in 1993. And the first wave of troops that always sees battle are the commandos. They are operating behind enemy lines. Their biggest advantage is speed, and they work fast, cheap, hard, and sometimes a bit unprofessional. And in a project or a company, these would be the ones building the prototype. The second wave of soldiers that comes in after the commandos and are the ones actually fighting out the battle is the infantry. These are the ones that take a prototype, refine it, test it, bring it to market, write the manuals, and hopefully make a profit. And once that has happened, the commandos and infantry head off into the next battle. And the third kind of comes in, which are not actually troops, but police. These are the ones that don't like change and try to grow by hiring new people and building economies of scale. That would be the maintenance phase of a project. And all 3 types of people are needed for the success of a project or also a company. And it is important to match people with the right abilities. So if you, for example, put a commando into a police role, they might actually screw things up because that is not the environment they like and are used to working. On the other hand, if you put someone who's a good fit for police into a commando role, they might actually stall and not produce anything because they cannot deal with the unstructured environment. Related to that is also the next model called Rumsfeld's rule after Donald Rumsfeld, who is quoted as, "You go to war with the army you have. They're not the army you might want or wish to have at a later time." And this is, I think, also something to keep in mind in the current resourcing situation at Netcentric. This basically says that organizations rarely have the perfect group of people available at a certain point in time, but also they cannot afford to wait until they are available. But still, these groups of people can be successful if they are led in the right way. And one model that describes how to mentor or guide someone is the model of deliberate practice. This goes back to K. Anders Ericsson, who did a lot of research in the area of deliberate practice. And he's quoted as, "The differences between expert performers and normal adults reflect a lifelong period of deliberate effort to improve performance in a specific domain." Basically, what he found out is how expert one becomes at a skill has more to do with how one practices than with merely practicing often. And deliberate practice means deliberately putting people at the limit of their abilities, constantly practicing increasingly difficult skills and receiving immediate feedback. And this can also be shown in this graphic. So you set a stretch goal that is outside your current abilities. You focus 100% on that goal, and it's important that you receive feedback from others, what you can improve. And then after a while, you can reflect and refine and set a new stretch goal. And this deliberate practice is a lot more intensive than regular practice. It can not be done alone as you depend on feedback from others, what you can improve. And it is hard to impose this on someone as it is exhausting, and people, if they don't buy in, they can resist. Another model that similarly describes a learning curve is the Dunning-Kruger effect, attributed to David Dunning and Justin Kruger. And this model describes the confidence people experience over time as they move from being a novice to being an expert. This can be seen in this graph. So on the x-axis, we have mapped the experience ranging from none to expert. On the y-axis, we have the confidence ranging from low to high. And when you learn a new skill, whether it's professionally or maybe learning a new instrument, In the beginning, because there is so much new to learn, you progress really quickly and your confidence skyrockets because you're thinking, wow, this is super. I can already play a scale on the piano, for example. This is going great. And you might even become a bit overconfident. But after a while, you realize, okay, there is so much more to learn that you don't even know yet, and it will really take a long time and hard work to become an expert in that skill. So your confidence goes down. And this model is important because as a coach, but also when you're learning something yourself, you should keep in mind that if someone is at the beginning of the learning curve and has just started learning a new skill, they might be overconfident. On the other hand, if you have been at it for a while and you're in the middle where your confidence is low and you might be thinking, oh, this skill is easy for me, it's probably also easy for everybody else, that people that you are coaching need encouragement, especially in the middle phase. Then moving on to the category of decision-making and biases, which we've already heard a bit about today. Please type your guess in the chat. So this is a question from an actual study that was done. It is about Linda. She's described as 31 years old, single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and she also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. So which fact do you think is more probable? 1, Linda is a bank teller, or 2, Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement. So if you guessed number 2, you are wrong, but don't be worried. The majority of people in the study actually answered that. This is called a conjunction fallacy. It goes back to Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. And this fallacy occurs when it is assumed that specific conditions are more probable than a single general one. What does that mean in this case? So in the example, we basically have 2 sets. We have bank tellers and we have feminists. And the intersection of them is feminist bank tellers. And as you can see, the amount of feminist bank tellers is at maximum as big as the amount of bank tellers in total. So mathematically, the intersection is smaller, and therefore just being, or Linda just being a bank teller is more probable. But as the description was leading us on in a certain way, we often come to the wrong assumption. And this model teaches us that we should try to simplify our assumptions that we base our decisions on. The next are 3 related biases or effects: the confirmation bias, backfire effect, and disconfirmation bias. The confirmation bias describes the tendency to search for, interpret, and recall information in a way that confirms one's prior beliefs or values. And I think this is something that we see in current times, especially with conspiracy theories related to the coronavirus. And this is reinforced by the filter bubbles introduced in social media. So if you believe in the conspiracy theory, you will interpret information about the coronavirus in a way that it confirms your previous belief. Related to that is, interestingly, the backfire effect, which describes the fact that even when people are given evidence against their beliefs, they can reject the evidence, so it can backfire and they can believe even more strongly into their original belief. In that case, that would mean if someone believes in a conspiracy theory, even when they are presented with evidence against it, they reject it and believe even more strongly in the conspiracy theory. And the third effect is the disconfirmation bias, which is the tendency that people set higher standards of evidence for hypotheses that go against their current expectations. An example would be, let's say you're trying to lose weight And every time in the morning, before you go into the shower, you step onto the bathroom scale and you are expecting to lose some weight. So if you step onto the bathroom scale and it shows that you've lost weight, you accept it and you go into the shower. But if it doesn't match your expectation and all of a sudden the bathroom scale shows that you have gained weight, oftentimes people step off the scale and step on it again to double check and make sure and really apply higher standards to the unexpected result. These effects describe why sometimes fresh eyes are helpful, or why sometimes also industry outsiders are successful in an industry. And it shows us that it's hard to question our own assumptions that we base our decisions on. The last two models I want to talk to you or show you today are from the area of communication. One is called the most respectful interpretation, which asks you to interpret another person's actions in the most respectful way possible. For example, let's say you send an email to an online shop because you have a question about a product, and after a week you still haven't received an answer. And I think the natural reaction would be to get angry, to think, oh, they are ignoring me, and maybe write an angry follow-up email. But most respectful interpretation asks you to give them the benefit of the doubt, because maybe they are very busy at the moment, not everybody is working because of the lockdown, and maybe they reached out to the manufacturer to get a confirmation from them to be really sure to give you the right answer. And this, of course, would change the tone of your follow-up message. Similar to that is Hanlon's razor, which says you should never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. So oftentimes, whether it's with teammates or also the customer, you might interpret certain actions or responses that these are done on purpose, they want to harm you or not help you or anything. But also this suggests that, well, oftentimes it's not really a bad intent, but rather carelessness or even stupidity. I think these are two models that, especially also in the current times with mostly digital communication, is important to keep in mind. So then to summarize, mental models are recurring concepts that describe a simplified model of the world to help us pattern match and make better decisions. Mental models can help us skip the lower level thinking and go directly to the higher level thinking. And to avoid applying the same models over and over, or to making sure that we apply the correct ones, a broad latticework of models is needed for many disciplines. And Charlie Munger suggests that about 80 to 90 models overall should suffice. So this was just a short glimpse into the world of mental models, and I want to close with two reading recommendations. The first one is the book Super Thinking, written by Gabriel Weinberg, the founder of the DuckDuckGo search engine, and his wife, that discusses a lot of models and their practical applications. And if your interest in biases has been raised, I can really recommend the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, that spent his life on the research about that and really has lots of interesting insights. And I put in a couple of other links on the web. Then thanks a lot for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I also appreciate your feedback. And remember, the map is not the territory.